the point of it is teaching you to unlock parts of your psyche and your personality that most people don't access.
Yeah.
AKA, I'm going to go kill that person.
Right.
I'm going to look in the eyes when I do it. That opens up a lot of other doors that we don't really like to talk about.
That was an active duty United States Marine, and this is the Brennan Carr Podcast.
Hey everybody, my name is Brendan Carr. I'm a podcast host and a veteran of the United States Navy, and in this episode I'm talking with an active duty United States Marine who has been struggling with pornography addiction for the last several years. We're going to talk about his own experience, his suggestions for others, and why he thinks that this is something that is so prevalent in the military. If you're someone who already has their mind made up about pornography, you think it's no big deal, you think that it doesn't affect people's lives, then this episode isn't for you. I suggest you tune in next week, and I'm sure there'll be something that you'll find more interesting. But if you're someone who's interested, who's open-minded, and who wants to know more about this topic, then this one's for you.
We have a pretty low production value on this one because I wanted to keep the guest anonymous, so there's no sound engineer, there's no camera crew, it's just a couple of simple cameras and a couple of simple microphones.
What got you into it in the first place?
Oh, great question. So when I was younger, about 4 years ago, I was dating this wonderful gal, and I told her about 3 months in, we were dating. I was like, look, I got to be honest with you, I have this problem. And back then, the problem wasn't so serious. It was more just like I'd gotten back from deployment, and I'd masturbated and looked at pornography, probably half a dozen, maybe a dozen times over the course of the year I was there in Afghanistan. And but it had gotten a little bit worse since I gotten back. And so I just, I sat her down. I was like, hey, look, this is the problem I got. Here's my, here's how long I've been struggling with it. I think I first looked at porn when I was like 15 or something like that. So pretty standard, pretty standard age. And it turns out her dad was, had been addicted to porn for like 35 years in her family's marriage. I didn't really know this until she got to know me a little better. And so she started opening up. And that was interesting conversation. Turns out her dad like cheated on her mom and just all kinds of and wasn't involved in the kids' lives. I mean, a lot of it was because of this pornography stuff. So when I told her, I had no idea. And I just thought, oh, she's actually like really cool about this. Like I was expecting a big drawn out scene, but she was, she had been around it enough so that it wasn't a surprise. I think my guess is she pretty much suspected. She was like, he's a guy in his 20s in the military. He's probably looked at it or has looked at porn or like done masturbation a lot too. So I don't think there was a lot of surprises there. But I did realize after we'd been dating for 9 months and I started ring shopping, I was like it's kept on coming up. And then we finally had a real conversation about it because I realized that this was not as minor of an issue as I thought it would be. And we had those conversations, and I realized this is a bigger deal than I thought. And so yeah, that was pretty much that.
That's how it started.
Yeah.
And you said that you thought that she had suspected that you were using pornography because you're a dude, you're in your 20s, and you're in the military. What is it about being in the military that would make people think that even? It would seem, you talk about a culture that's built on honor, for example, and yet people assume that people in the military do all kinds of things that would not be consistent with that. Why the military assumption?
Well, because it's largely true. I mean, all this stuff is endemic. I was raised Catholic, am Catholic still. I try to practice the faith as best I can. But even me, like, it's all the tropes of masturbates, pornography, drinks too much, whatever. That's all true. And in spades. And I know that, talking with guys who even, even have been in the military for a while, have been married for a long time, etc. These are still things they deal with. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that goes into it. For a lot of guys, it's a release from just the stress of military life. For a lot of guys who deploy, it's just something to take your mind off the boredom and the stress. That's a small percentage of it, of the guys that are, like deployed in like actual combat zones. But there's also just going back to the culture piece you were talking about, just, sex is something to do on the weekends, and it's exciting, and it brings momentary relief from the suck that is, most military life. If you're a junior enlisted, soldier, Marine, airman, coastie, sailor, life isn't too great. So it's a way to kind of get your mind off that, combined with drinking. Lot of young guys, first time that they're on their own with a paycheck,
Right.
with relatively little self-control, surrounded by other guys with no self-control. And it just kind of, it's a culture that kind of builds on itself. And I think that, it's also representative of where these guys come from too, where, if the wider culture is that, sex is good, there's no limits to it, and that masturbation and pornography are how you grow your sexual prowess, or how you grow your understanding, teach yourself how to have sex, then, that's there's no inherent controls in the military that are gonna, moderate that,
Right.
really. Besides, whatever faith you bring to it, and whatever interpretation you have of the core values of whatever service you're in, be it the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Army, or the Coast Guard,
Yeah.
and the Air Force.
It seems to sort of perpetuate too, like down through the ranks. It seems, I know when I joined the Navy, like if I saw someone one rank above me doing something, I thought that's a good thing to do. Like whatever it was, I want to do that. I want people to think that I do that. I want to look cool. I want to look like I belong here. And then when I got through training and I got to my first unit, I was really shocked at how pornography was something that was openly talked about by the guys who were relatively senior. And they would say it like it was very natural. This was officers, enlisted, pretty high up. And it seemed that for the new guys who came in, then they would talk about it too, because they wanted to fit in. Why do you think it is that it seems to continue to be passed down? Or have you
Great
seen
question.
anything like that?
So I think that there's it goes two ways, and I think that the concept of pornography being passed down is a relatively recent phenomenon, because pornography it hasn't been mainstream for, I think even in the military, it hasn't been mainstream for more than about 15 years.
Okay.
Since the internet really hit big. Obviously in the military, like we've had, dirty mags since the time that, photographs could be taken, right?
Right.
Like stills. But I think that really easily accessible videos where it's much more interactive and there's action versus just visuals has been a huge part of why it's exploded in the general culture, as well as in the military. And I think that the military has long used sex and the related trappings, pornography, masturbation, as a complement to violence, and as a how do we say this? As a release, but also a something that gives you the same kind of rush as violence. So it's sort of if I'm a man because I kill people, or if I'm a man because I engage in violence, then something that's very similar that gives me the same rush and the same guilt and the same feelings of pleasure, then that must also be part of what it means to be a man, which is what sex does and what pornography does and what masturbation does and all that kind of good stuff. And so the pornography tying into that is basically like gasoline on the fire, where now it's a lot easier to get the content, and it's a hell of a lot easier to get the high, with your phone, and 4G data anywhere, even while deployed.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we were talking earlier about gate traffic in Norfolk, Virginia, and I would have guys in my unit who would come in from like one of those days when you wait an hour in the traffic, and they talk about what they were doing while they were killing time, and guys would say like, I was watching porn on my phone. That's what they were doing in the traffic.
In line.
In the car lineup.
Wow.
I don't make this up.
That is something I have never.
It's
heard
so
that.
accessible.
Oh yeah. Wow. And I think the, it's, you talked earlier about example, and like the older generation leaders passing that on is something which is good to do. There's also an aspect where, as a leader, you have to try to relate to your guys. And I think a lot of times guys take, like senior leaders or mid-grade leaders, they're like, hey, what can I relate to my guys on? We can drink, drinking, pornography, sex, things of that. I mean, that's pretty much it, I guess. But they're very easy to relate to because that's what guys are thinking about.
Yeah.
Drinking and sex, right? And everything associated with that. So as regards to, older leaders encouraging their sailors, Marines, soldiers to do that stuff, I think it's definitely a very much of a two-way street where that's what your junior guys are already doing. Yeah. So as a leader trying to relate to them and trying to humanize yourself to them, you're gonna talk about and you're gonna relate things to things that they understand. Because that's where they're at. Right. So you're gonna try to, make yourself understood and heard at their level.
Right. So. Yeah, and like as someone who was a junior officer in the Navy, like I remember wanting to feel like the guys could relate to me like that. Like, around things like working out. If there was a group PT, I was going to be there. Yep. Even if it wasn't required of me or other officers wouldn't go, it was like, well, this is a chance to be around these guys in a way where I'm part of the group or where they see me in a more human way. And this is a good opportunity to do that. And, if I can show off, if it's something I'm going to be good at, like I was at times insecure when I was new there and I wanted them to know, like, I'm fit. I'm like you. I'll put myself out there. I'll try hard. So I can see how it's one more path to that people try to fit in.
Yep. The old safety brief mechanism, weekend safety brief of, don't add to this population, don't subtract from the population this weekend. Don't get a DUI.
I haven't heard that one quite like that. It must be a Marine Corps thing.
I'm probably screwing up the
I like it.
But
I like it.
Weekend safe, the old, So, I think that's...
Yeah. At my unit, we had an incident that got everybody talking about both sides of the pornography issue. I don't know if I told you about this. This might have been while you were away on a deployment, but we had some civilians who worked with us, and they had a Wi-Fi network. And then one day, one of them got a letter that there had been large volumes of copyrighted illegal pornography downloaded through their network. I didn't tell you about this.
No, you didn't.
Oh, okay.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It was a huge to-do because nobody would fess up to it. Nobody would say, "Oh, that was me." But like this was a big problem, and it was putting this civilian group's whole work in jeopardy too, because it was coming to them, and they had been so generous as to say like, "Hey, we work together. If you guys want to use our Wi-Fi, that's cool." And so like we were, as like the officers, we were getting together, and we were like, first of all, okay, was this any of us? And nobody said it was. And so, okay, what do we do? And we tried working through the chain of command and like asking like, the chiefs to try and figure it out. And nobody fessed up. And in the end, blaming or figuring out who did it wasn't actually going to do much anyway, except to like tell that person like, hey, you need to stop, or to make an example of them or something. And so what ended up being the conclusion was that we would have a day where everybody would have to give a presentation about something related to pornography. And the things that we got were really interesting. There were guys who were making points about why it wasn't good, or why it wasn't healthy, or the evolution of it. Like you explained, like it's come from still images to now where we have, infinite terabytes of data coming through the internet all the time. So much of it's video, so much of it's pornographic video. And I wonder now, what sides of this are you hearing? What's interesting to you as far as, what's good for you, what's bad for you about it?
Okay. Well, first of all, there's two levels you can talk about this on. The first one is the religious level. And I think that most religions would categorically say that anything that takes you sexually away from marriage or your spouse or something of that nature is probably not going to be good for you. But I think it's interesting on the natural level where you start talking about what does it do to your brain chemistry? Yeah. How does it affect your sexual drive? How does it affect the way that you look at women? How does it affect the way that you think about women? Not just like physically look at them, but like actually like, what is a woman to me? You know, there's a lot of research and studies out there that show that it has a very similar effect to certain type of drug addictions on the way that it spikes your brain's access to dopamine, endorphins, adrenaline through, essentially acting as gasoline on the fire by visually representing sexual acts, visually and auditory representing sexual acts to complement your masturbation. And essentially you are undergoing, multiple exponentially more times of orgasms than the human sexual system was originally designed to undergo, because you can masturbate, 5, 6, 7 times a day. And generally, that's the human sexual system is not capable of handling that without becoming addicted to it because of the massive amounts of natural hormones and drugs that your brain, your body releases upon each time you have an orgasm with masturbation or with pornography. So it's interesting because eventually, if every 30 seconds I can flip from one, perfectly airbrushed, lady, with perfect body, silicone tits, breast enhancements, all that kind of good stuff, perfect body, perfect face, young 20-somethings who's quote unquote perfectly willing and just is ready for whatever, stuff that's going to happen to her, the other, or that she's going to be forced to do. Every 30 seconds, I can see the most beautiful woman in the world doing every conceivable sexual act with no, concept with no, how would I say this? With no, like needs of her own. Like she's just doing it for the viewer and for the guy that she's having sex with. It spoils you because now it becomes about what's in it for me, and it ignores the spiritual aspect of it because the woman has nothing. She has no object in the video besides pleasing you, and so then you lose the sense of like the fact that it's a mutual gift instead of a give me kind of idea. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is that the more you do it, the deeper that the neural pathways that are created by this massive overflow of these, these endorphins and dopamine and adrenaline cocktail that your brain can't handle at the amounts that most people use it today. It creates the desire to do it in real life, right? So a lot of times people use this pornography. They learn about sex from pornography, but also they learn. They want to act out some of the kinkier stuff they see online in real life, right? So in the worst cases, that'll lead us to, some deviant, interesting sexual practices, or in rare cases to rape. But that's that's not the norm. But what it does do is it creates the expectation that the first time I go out and have sex, right, it's all about me. It's all about my desire. It's all about my visuals. It's about me being pleasured, and that my partner doesn't need to, doesn't have any desires, and they're just doing it for me. Right. So I think that, what comes from that is just, in my own life, what has come from that is like I will look at a woman and I will see, forgive my French, I'll see tits, ass, and face, and then, you know, all the other curves. And then eventually I'll get around to like knowing, getting her personality down. Right. And so you prejudge people, you look at them differently. You look at them as objects as opposed to intellectual beings who have, you know, a free will and an intellect who are equal to you. And you make the mistake of, you know, looking at them only as things that you can use for your own sexual pleasure. Either by if you're able to, you know, to get them into bed, to be selfish with your sex, or by, you know, just using them as a mental springboard for further masturbation, pornography, or just, you know, imagining what sex would look like with them.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. And I think, you know, being in the military, kind of tie it back into the military aspect of it, you know, given the fact that, you know, the military is designed by nature to teach you to, you know, especially like the combat arms, like it's the point of it is teaching you to unlock parts of your psyche and your personality that most people don't access. Yeah. AKA, I'm going to go kill that person. Right. And I'm going to look in the eyes when I do it. That opens up a lot of other doors that we don't really like to talk about. And one of those is the perversions of sex and the perversions of manliness that make sexual promiscuity not just a sanctioned thing, but a positive good for those who are, you know, those who are supposed to be the warriors.
Right. Yeah. It's often praised. Like if somebody's really promiscuous, it's, oh, he's a stud. Yep. Like, exactly. Oh, he gets around. Like that's said as a good thing about men. Because
it shows that he's conquering something. He's being proactive in seizing and conquering and you know, taking something for himself. And while you're, you know, the sexual act doesn't kill someone, it's a conquest. That's why they call it sexual conquest. And so that same part of the soul, I think, is what drives, you know, somebody to continue in the offensive when his buddies are dead and he's tired, cold, wet, hungry, hasn't slept for 5 days, is the same part of human nature that, you know, allows you to have an all night, you know, get sloshed and then, you know, have, you know, sexual conquest every weekend or something like that. I'm not really putting it too well, but I think you get the point I'm trying to
I get it. Yeah. I get it. Yeah. And you like, it's a drive. Like it's a super strong drive. It's praised. And then it sounds like what you're saying is that even if you put someone in a situation where normally they'd go to bed, like you've been up late drinking, then if you have this new drive introduced, you meet a nice girl who's interesting or something, and you think, oh, she's hot, then all of a sudden, you know, I could stay up another hour. I'll keep going. Let's see where this night takes me. That's it. I think that's what you're saying, is that we have this really strong drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then to your point with pornography and masturbation, you talk about it as how it's, you know, making these neural pathways stronger and stronger. You've got such a strong reward at the end of that habit loop. I mean, if you think of a habit as, you know, something that sets you up, the action, and then the reward at the end, to have a reward like an orgasm that we're so, as humans, like so strongly wired for, how do you overcome that? If that becomes your habit loop, how do you get past that?
That's a great question. So, you know, in full disclosure, I haven't figured out how to overcome it. Yeah. I know I've tried, you know, different techniques at different times. Probably the most successful has just been, you know, accountability. But it can't just be accountability, because a lot of times what ends up happening is that it's something that's, you know, trying to address that you're using pornography to address some kind of deeper hurt or need, or, you know, a way to relieve stress, a way to pass the time. Yeah. And, you know, being in a military culture that glorifies sexual promiscuity makes it a lot easier to find excuses for it. But oftentimes, in order to fully get rid of it, there's deeper issues at play. Yeah. You know, say someone, you know, gets fucked up on deployment, right? And sex and pornography is a way to ease the pain.
By fucked up, you mean drinking too much? Or
No.
wounded?
So like say a guy, he has a super kinetic deployment. He loses friends. He has to kill people.
Okay.
He comes back and he's different because he's had to experience things and do things that aren't normal for human beings to do. Maybe in that case, masturbation and pornography and a lot of sex become a way to overcome that, or at least kind of put the pain in the background, right? Other case, maybe somebody has an unresolved family issue from when he was a kid, right? Daddy issues, mommy issues, whatever it is. Then joining a institution like the military, where sex is a really good way to just kind of feel good and pass the time, drink a lot, that becomes his coping mechanism, because everybody else is doing it, so why not? I'll jump right in.
Right.
There's 100 different things that it could be. And a lot of times, in order to really cure it, starts with recognizing that most of the time it is a symptom. Using pornography and masturbating is a symptom of something deeper, so that you have to attack that root cause.
Yeah.
Right. As regards to just stopping pornography and masturbation, it's not an easy process. In fact, it's one of those things where you can press the pause button, but you're going to relapse as you try to recover. Very similar to like a alcohol addiction, or really any addiction, because that's what it is. It's an addiction. And so persistence, humility, accountability partners is huge. And then just, prayer to whatever God you believe in. But I can't stress again how much important accountability is. But again, a lot of times it's going to be seeking help for whatever the deeper issue is.
Yeah.
Which you may not even know until you start digging.
Right. So I want to talk about the accountability thing in a bit, because I don't think that's something that's people are talking about. People are talking about ways to make little changes to the habits, or getting a browser blocker or something. But I think that's going to be really big. But first, how do you address those deeper issues? Like you think you talk to someone, or you spend some time in nature and kind of reflect for yourself a bit?
Great question. I think all of the above. Where, if you're religious, that means you pray more. And I know people, you can't pray pornography away. And I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that it starts with whatever your belief system is, becoming more serious and more connected with that. So if you do pray, if you have a God you pray to, rekindle that relationship.
Okay.
Right? Why am I? What about this? Is wrong? Is it immoral? And if it's immoral, then I have a reason now, based on my belief system, to stop whatever this thing is. The next avenue is definitely mental health counseling. So psychiatry, psychiatrists, and psychology to help diagnose whatever the deeper trend is. A lot of people aren't comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So if you're in the military and that's something that you think about, then go to a civilian. Find a friendly civilian who can do pro bono work for the military to help treat PTSD. Right.
Yes, and I would add, if anybody is listening, there's Military One Source. That's a great place to start. I think they'll do 12 free sessions for a lot of things.
Yep. And that way, it's outside of the normal. It's outside of the chain of commands. You're confidential. It's not reported.
Right. And
so you can kind of sideswipe a lot of the stigmas of being like, oh, hey, I go see a shrink. And I've done that in the past. I've gone to talk to a psychologist about this particular problem in the past for a little while.
Yeah, and I would add, I used Military One Source after a car accident.
Yep.
I was having a really hard time, getting back in the car.
Okay.
And I went there 12 sessions. It's not on any record or anything. Now it's on the record, but that's okay.
Yeah, sure. VA, right?
No, I mean just you and me.
Oh, yeah.
On this
Yeah,
record.
there you go.
Yeah.
And another version of that, which is slightly less stigmatized is just telling people about it.
Okay.
Honesty.
Okay.
I found that that's a huge one. So, be it a trusted confidant, a romantic partner, a parent, a sibling, a friend, a coworker, somebody, a priest, a rabbi, whatever again denomination you are. That's a huge first step. Is just telling someone, because it's kind of unburdening yourself of that guilt that you hold inside. And then you'll very quickly realize that it's a very common problem, and that people all over, not just military, but civilians and, everybody around the world is struggling with this same problem. In fact, funny story, when they killed Osama bin Laden 8 years ago today, I think, if I remember correctly, they found all kinds of pornography. Like, most of his computer was porn, because that was just what he did. He was, he's one of the most, fundamentalist zealots of the 20th century and the early 21st century. But still, he had a pornography problem, even though he was about as devout in his particular faith as you could be. And it's a very common thing in all civilizations, peoples, and faith traditions. So accountability. Going back to what you were talking about before, accountability is huge, because really, it's like anything in the military. It's all about assembling a team, because individuals are much more susceptible, and it's a lot harder to achieve a mission without having buddy pairs, without having a team.
Yeah.
Whatever that team looks like. Same concept applies in the pornography addiction world, where it's overwhelming to try to beat something like this cold turkey. And then honestly, it's depending upon how addicted you are, it's probably impossible. But having someone who has gone through the same struggle or is going through the same struggle is a huge force multiplier. And it makes it a collective effort and a common goal, right? So it's not so much just, I'm suffering this thing, I have to beat this thing myself, and I'm the only one going through this. It's, we have a common problem that we are attempting to solve, overcome, get over, however you want to say it. And that sense of teamwork cannot be overestimated in how important it is to motivate yourself, hold yourself accountable, and to strive to overcome your addiction to masturbation, pornography, and then just sex and, premarital sex in general.
Yeah. And that speaks to so many drives that people have too, when you talk about just being able to get together with people, get something off your chest, or if you're doing it with a group of guys, then you've got a sense of brotherhood for a change, which you might not feel otherwise. You might feel kind of isolated or something. That's why people turn to things. It can hit on so many different levels, I think, to get into an accountability situation or something like that.
Absolutely. And it's, it shows you in a fundamental level, like, you truly aren't alone. Yeah. And I think that a lot of folks, I think it's big with a lot of my, friends who've gotten out of the military. Like, one of the big things they miss is like a sense of purpose, teamwork, people striving towards a common goal. And by having accountability partners, you're taking the best aspects of the profession that we're in and applying that to a moral problem and a psychological problem and a chemical problem within your brain and your life. And, recreating that sense of camaraderie, teamwork, and striving towards that common goal to help each other become better men and women. Mostly men. Yeah. Should we talk about women? We could.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, but do you think this is, I guess I'm curious about the numbers too. Like, what percentage of the military, or let's say the Marine Corps, do you think is using pornography regularly?
Oh boy, lots. There's no any official polls, unless they're anonymous, even if they are anonymous, are probably, very much on the low end. So I would say most, definitely a majority, 90% maybe.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I believe it. I did some research, like looking on the American Psychological Association's website.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have any clear understanding on their numbers either, but they were thinking 50 to 99%. Those were the numbers that they were pulling from different studies and things.
Closer to 99, for sure. And because, 85% of the military is on their first enlistment in their first 4 years.
85% of the military is in their first 4 years?
This is the Marine Corps, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
young guys,
all the stuff we already talked about with the culture, where they're coming from, what stage they're at physically, mentally, emotionally, and morally in their lives,
mm-hmm.
and they're in this environment of violence and trying to overcome their their normal impulses. I mean, it's essentially a custom built setup for use of pornography, use of masturbation, and just having sex. Because the first job they've had, the first time outside the home, etc.
Right. All those things you mentioned, having money for a change.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So much when you're 18.
Oh yeah.
To all of a sudden have all that.
Yep.
Yeah. What else do you think is important for people to know?
Just it, depending upon where you are personally with this, you may either be still trying to learn about it because you're interested in the science aspect of it, of whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Mm. You may be deeply religious and ashamed of your addiction. You may consider this pornography or masturbation to be a positive good of your sexual life, to teach you how to be, more sexually pleasing to your partner or to have better sex. I think regardless of where you are with pornography, I would challenge you to keep on the path of trying to understand what it is and what its effects are. Starting with the science and then seeing where that fits in with your moral belief system, right? And your sort of sense of what is right and what is wrong. Personally, of course, I think I've made it pretty clear that I consider it to be both a physical and a moral evil, but I understand very clearly that not everybody does think that. Yeah. And so that's why, as with anything, I would just offer to continue to research, continue to have an open mind to the positives or the negatives of it, depending upon what you continue to understand. And as you become more educated on it, have that conversation with your significant other.
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes you'd be surprised about how divergent those views can be. From personal experience, I know a couple years ago, I met the woman that if I hadn't told her would probably be my wife right now. And, it ended up being the decision that she made to not continue our relationship at a very early stage because of my honesty. And so, I can tell you right now, my policy has always been to just be upfront and honest about where I'm at with this stuff and where I struggle with it. And it's gotten me many times. It'll be the second date, and they'll be like, oh, well, hey, thank you for asking me out, but I can't do that. I can't handle that. And so I think it's better to just have those honest conversations and have the openness to be open to changing your mind, regardless of where you're at on the topic.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Fight the New Drug? Have you looked on their website before, articles and things that they have?
I have. It's been a little while, but yeah. Yes.
So they always have like good peer-reviewed research and things, and I found looking in there all kinds of stuff that I hadn't even thought about. One thing they made a great point about, and they showed some real evidence to back it up, is that pornography use is linked to sex trafficking in the world, because a lot of these videos, especially child pornography and things, are children who are sex trafficked. And then they're taken into prostitution or pornography or both. And that's feeding sort of the demand for sex trafficking by using pornography. Have you seen anything else like that?
Absolutely. So, in the military, prostitution is very illegal, but, anecdotally, it's very common that military members will, engage in that kind of activity. So there's two reasons why it's important. The first one you touched on was the women in the sex videos are sometimes coerced, sometimes for lack of better options, and sometimes, drugged up to where it becomes a way to continue a particular lifestyle. But I think the other one that's maybe less thought of and less talked about is that if I see something enough times in a sex video that's just, let's say it's a BDSM move or something kinky or something, kind of weird that you want to try, it's a lot easier to pay someone a couple $100 to just have your way with them than it is to have a steady romantic partner who may not be into all that stuff. Right. And it's a lot quicker and cheaper in the long run to just pay someone to work for you by allowing you to experiment and feel these things and do these things that you see in pornography. And that, I think there's a direct link to how people build their own sexual repertoire, so to speak, with prostitution to experiment, and then further with dating apps like Tinder, where it's very easy to have a one night stand to just practice some of this stuff. So I think in both cases it definitely builds on itself with regards to actually trying to do the things that you see and have masturbated to.
And what have you heard about this being related to erectile dysfunction? Is there a connection between porn and erectile dysfunction?
Going back to the point where your sexual system is only designed to take so much sex and so much endorphins and cocktail adrenal cocktails, the more you do it, the more is required to achieve erection and orgasm. The more stimulation. The more porn you look at, the more masturbation you have, the more stimulation is required.
Okay.
So a lot of times seeing a naked woman or a naked man, if you're a woman listening to this podcast, is not enough because they haven't done something, they haven't performed sexual acts here, they don't have a perfect body or, whatever it is. And so it just takes more to become sexually aroused, especially for men because you're so visual. And in some cases it's you've overused your hardware, so to speak.
Yeah, I remember the first time I ever stumbled onto an image like that on the internet. I was 14 years old and I was doing research for a project about the immune system from a biology class, and I needed an image of barbed wire. It's like, this is so vivid, this memory. And so I put into Google image search barbed wire, and then there was a picture of a naked woman with a barbed wire tattoo. And then when I was 14, that just set me off. Like, that I could see this, that was so much excitement. But now, like, with all the images that I see out in culture or that I have seen in the past, I don't think that would change my day in the same way that it did then. I think there's definitely been a desensitization over the years that just it's not coming back in the same way.
I mean, same. I mean, I could when I was 15, I could Google, porn or sex or something like that, get a suggestive Playboy cover or a Playboy, spread or whatever, and it would just set me off. I'd be, satisfied for days, right? But now, that it's not even a glitch in the radar. Like I can look at that and not even be aroused. So yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Desensitization, especially like I said, with the advent of the internet and the ability to pull up video on demand, like high quality video on demand, not without even pay for it. You can access, hundreds and thousands of videos, quality videos, without even paying for them.
No. Oh, for free. Anything you could think of.
Absolutely. But in general, my recommendation is start with programs like Fight the New Drug that educate you on the science first, and then allow the religion and the morality to catch up later. Because a lot of times what people do is they'll approach it like, I am an evil person because I do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And then they try to attack it from that angle with ignoring the biological and the scientific effects of pornography, masturbation, and frequent sex on the body and the mind and the brain. And they are continually frustrated because they continually fall back into the same patterns. Mm-hmm. But if you approach it from the scientific viewpoint, where you understand and become to learn that it, in large enough doses, it leads to addiction, sex addiction, porn addiction, masturbation, etc., then that will much more clearly explain and contextualize the moral impact that it has on your life and whatever belief system you have. So along those lines, there's a pretty wide challenge. I think it originated on Reddit, but I don't know where it is now, called the NoFap challenge, which is essentially 30 days no masturbation, and then see how you feel, and then post about, hey, I've been able to do this, and this, and I've been, I feel better about myself, or I have less, of this problem now, or I have better sex with my partner. Mm-hmm. Fight the New Drug, great resource. Definitely, has a religious overtone, but it's very scientifically based. And then there are several other services out there, which I don't have off the top of my head, that would allow you, again, to get that scientific baseline of what the effect on the body and the brain are, and then allow that to lead you to moral conclusions about why something is wrong, mm-hmm. and how you can attack it in an effective manner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the NoFap thing, you're saying not something that you're particularly familiar with, and I'm not totally either, but I watch a ton of YouTube, and I've seen people make videos about how they'll do the NoFap challenge, and they say that, like, it changes their lives. Like, people go 90 days. For those who don't know what NoFap is, FAP is slang for masturbation, so no masturbation. People go 90 days without masturbation, and they say it changes their lives. They have new energy. They feel stronger. They say it makes massive improvements in their personal sex with an actual human being. Like, just all of that changed. And so I think that would probably be another thing worth checking out, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would very much agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I have one final question for you. If you're talking to a leader who recognizes that there's a lot of pornography issues in their group culture, what would you suggest they do first?
Honestly, and this is just from personal experience, mm-hmm. sometimes you don't. Okay. And there's a couple reasons for that. The first reason is that I don't think that any junior enlisted from any branch of service would long listen to a leader who shows up with a Bible in hand and starts telling them about those things that they can't do, mm-hmm. or shows up with a lecture on ethics, but without establishing personal credibility, right? And so I think the biggest thing is just establishing credibility within the organization, proven leadership about the job, the performance, the things that you're supposed to be doing, in regards to your position as leader, right? Leading your guys. And then as that relationship improves, inevitably people will ask you, hey, sir, or hey, chief, or hey, Gunny, how are you successful? How are you, what do you do to become a better Marine? What do you do to, why are you always doing this? Why are you always reading? Why are you always, doing pull-ups or whatever it is, right, that they see that you're good at and that you're a leader in. And then those conversations, those one-on-one, or maybe small group, but mostly one-on-one conversations, open up pathways to do that mentoring. And it's established through just being, leading by setting the example by, showing kindness to those under your charge, not being the guy who gets drunk at the unit picnic, things of that nature, so that they see that there's a certain measure of control, right? You're not off the chain. And I think the exception to this that I found is that if you, during off hours, lunch, or after work, form a specifically religious group, like a Bible study or something along those lines, those people in your command, if they know about it, they will come. And then that allows you to fast track those conversations.
Okay.
But in the normal course of things, when the majority of people are probably not extremely religious and probably have no problem with sex, pornography, and masturbation, in order to actually have that kind of impact, you have to know someone pretty well.
Yeah.
And have demonstrated leadership before you broach those topics.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Fist bump.
Cool.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you want to help us out with this, the best thing you could do is share this with other people, talk about it in the comments, create some buzz around it, and that triggers the algorithms that get this out to more people as well. So feel free to do that. It would be much appreciated. And I'll catch you next time.